I heard their cruel laughter, planning to sell my life to go to Europe, believing I was no longer good for anything. I am Inez. I am 68 years old, and I built a textile empire from nothing. They don't know that my will can change in a second. The house was silent, or at least it seemed that way. It was that time of the afternoon when the sun comes in sideways through the high windows, and you can see dust particles dancing in the air. I have always liked this hour. It reminds me of the times when I would close the sewing workshop and finally sit down for 5 minutes to breathe. But today, the silence had a different weight. My knees, which have been complaining about the humidity and cold for years, hurt more than usual. I was going down the stairs carefully, holding on tight to the dark wood banister that my late husband, may he rest in peace, had varnished with his own hands 30 years ago. I was just looking for a glass of water, nothing more. I didn't want to bother anyone. Since Roberto, my only son, and Claudia, his wife, moved in with me 6 months ago, I have tried to make myself small in my own house. They said it was to take care of me, that a woman of my age shouldn't be alone in such a big mansion. At first, I felt grateful. Loneliness is a bad companion and fills your head with sad noises. I thought having my son close, hearing footsteps in the hallway and smelling coffee in the mornings would be a gift from heaven for my final years. How wrong I was. I stopped on the landing of the stairs. The pain in my right leg gave me a sharp jab, and I had to stop to catch my breath. It was then that I heard the voices coming from the main living room. They weren't shouting, but in this old house the walls listen and echoes rise like smoke. "Oh, Roberto, but I can't stand the smell of mothballs in this room anymore." It was Claudia's voice. I imagined her wrinkling her nose with that gesture of disgust she makes every time she thinks I'm not looking. "Everything here is old. Everything is depressing." "I know, my love. Have patience," Roberto replied. His voice sounded tired or perhaps bored, the same voice he used when I asked him to help me change a light bulb. "It won't be long now. The doctor said her heart isn't as strong as it seems. It's a matter of time." I felt an icy chill run down my back, a cold that had nothing to do with a draft. I stood motionless, my hand squeezing the wood until my knuckles turned white. I couldn't breathe. I didn't want to breathe so as not to make noise. "But how much time?" she insisted, and I could hear the sound of a glass being placed on the coffee table, my mahogany table that I cared for with such dedication. "We've been here 6 months playing nurse. I want to live, Roberto. I want to go to Europe like you promised. Imagine, you and I in Paris, far away from all this." Roberto let out a short, dry laugh. "When the old lady dies, we sell everything and go to Europe. I promise you. This house is worth a fortune just for the land, and the downtown premises, even though they are rented out cheaply, if we sell them together, we get millions. With that, we live the high life, Claudia. We forget about working." "And the jewelry?" she asked with a greed that churned my stomach. "That pearl necklace and the gold rings, all for you, or we sell that too." "What do I care? The only thing that matters is that she kicks the bucket soon." They laughed. Both of them laughed. It was a conspiratorial laugh, loaded with future plans where I no longer existed, where I was just an obstacle, an old piece of furniture that had to be removed to remodel the room. I stayed there, petrified on the step. My legs were trembling, but it was no longer from bone pain, but from the impact of betrayal. My Roberto. The boy whose scraped knees I cured, whose university I paid for by selling dresses and uniforms until the wee hours of the morning, whose debts and mistakes I forgave so many times. That man down there, laughing at my death, couldn't be my son, but he was. And that woman I received with open arms, to whom I gifted my grandmother's tea set on her wedding day, was calculating how much my rings were worth, while I was still breathing upstairs. Slowly, with a superhuman effort so my shoes wouldn't make the slightest creak on the wood, I turned around. I climbed the steps I had gone down. Each step up was a stab in the heart. I locked myself in my room and let myself fall into the armchair by the window. I didn't cry. I wanted to cry. I felt the tears burning behind my eyes, but they didn't come out. The indignation was stronger than the sadness. I looked at my hands, workers' hands, hands that had cut thousands of meters of fabric, that had handled heavy scissors and industrial machines. These hands were not those of a useless person. These hands had built the heritage that those two vultures wanted to devour. I remembered when I was widowed 25 years ago. Roberto was a teenager. Everyone thought I would sell the workshop, that I would go live with a sister, that a single woman couldn't manage the textile business. They were wrong. Not only did I maintain it, I made it grow. I bought the downtown premises when no one would give a peso for that area. I made contracts with schools, with hospitals. I was Inés, La Patrona, as my employees called me with respect. At what moment did I become the old woman in the way? I got up and went to the vanity mirror. I saw my gray hair, my wrinkles, my eyelids a bit droopy. Yes, time has passed, but in my eyes there was still that spark, that hardness that served me to negotiate with difficult suppliers and not let myself be intimidated by bankers. They saw a fragile old lady. I saw a survivor. So, Europe? I whispered to myself. My voice sounded firm in the solitude of the room. So sell everything. The rage began to transform into something colder, more calculated. Roberto had forgotten whose son he was. He had forgotten that intelligence isn't lost with gray hair. He was always lazy, wanting things easy. He never wanted to learn the business. He preferred to spend what I earned, and I, out of a mother's love, allowed it too many times. But a mother's love has a limit, and that limit is dignity. I opened the drawer of my nightstand where I kept my important documents under lock and key. I took out the black leather folder. There was my current will, drafted 5 years ago when I had that scare with high blood pressure. In that paper, Roberto was the universal heir. Everything for him. The house, the premises, the bank accounts, the investments. Everything I had sweated for in my life was going to end up in his hands, so that he and Claudia could spend it on trips and luxuries while laughing at my memory. Over my dead body, I said, and the irony of the phrase made me smile bitterly. I looked at the clock. It was 4 in the afternoon. The office of Licenciado Valenzuela, my lifelong lawyer and old family friend, was open until 7. Don Ernesto Valenzuela had always told me, "Inés, protect what is yours. Children are ungrateful." How right you were, Ernesto. How right. I got ready. I didn't put on the house coat I used for comfort. No. I went to the closet and took out a navy blue tailored suit. Fine fabric. One I hadn't worn in a long time. I put on low but elegant shoes. I combed my hair back into an impeccable bun and put on a little lipstick. I draped a silk scarf around my neck. If I was going to war, I had to go with my uniform on. I took my purse, put in the folder with the documents, my checkbook, and my phone. Before leaving the room, I took 3 deep breaths. I had to act. I had to be the best actress in the world. I went down the stairs again. This time I made noise on purpose. I coughed a little while descending. "Mom." Roberto's voice sounded from the living room with a falsely worried tone. Surely they had stopped laughing as soon as they heard my footsteps. "Where are you going all dressed up?" I entered the living room. I saw them sitting on the sofa, very close together. Upon seeing me, they separated a bit. Claudia looked me up and down with surprise, and then composed that plastic smile that now gave me nausea. "Oh, mother-in-law, how lovely you look. Are you going out?" "Yes, daughter," I replied, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. It was the calm before the storm. "I'm going to church for a while. I need to pray. I feel a little restless, and while I'm out, I'm going to the pharmacy. I ran out of blood pressure pills." Roberto stood up, acting helpful. "Do you want me to take you, Mom? Should you be walking alone in the street?" "No, son, don't worry," I said, approaching him and giving him a soft pat on the cheek. I felt his skin, my son's skin, and I had to hold back the urge to scream at him that he was a traitor. "I need to walk. The doctor said it's good for my circulation." "Besides, the taxi drops me at the door. I won't be long." "Okay, but be careful. Take your cell phone," he said, sitting back down, clearly relieved not to have to accompany me. "Yes, my son. You too rest. You look tired from so much caring for me." I dropped the phrase softly, looking them in the eyes. For a second, I saw a flash of confusion in Claudia's gaze, but it disappeared quickly. They are too arrogant to think that I could know something. I left the house, and the street air hit my face. It was fresh air, freedom air. I walked to the corner with a firmer step than I had had in months. Indignation is a great painkiller. I hailed a taxi and gave the address of the office in the city center. While the car advanced through the streets, I knew by heart, where I had traveled so many times carrying rolls of fabric, my mind was working at 1,000 miles per hour. It wasn't just about taking the inheritance away from them. That was the easy part. It was about teaching them a lesson. It was about showing them that this old woman still had control of her destiny. I arrived at the old building where Ernesto had his office. The doorman greeted me kindly. "Doña Inés, what a miracle. We haven't seen you around here for a long time." "That's right, Pedro. I've been busy, but business doesn't wait," I replied with a smile. I went up in the great elevator. Upon arriving at the reception, the secretary announced me immediately. Ernesto came out to receive me, with his gray suit and his glasses hanging around his neck. "Inés, what a surprise. To what do I owe the honor? Did something happen with Roberto?" I entered his office and closed the door behind me. The smell of old books and wood calmed me. I sat in front of his desk, put my purse on my lap, and looked him straight in the eyes. "Yes, Ernesto. Something happened with Roberto. It happened that he forgot who I am," I said with a firm voice. "I want to revoke my will. I want to change everything, and not only that, I need you to prepare the papers to create a foundation. And I want to review the joint accounts. Today." Ernesto looked at me, adjusted his glasses, and saw the determination on my face. He didn't ask silly questions. He had known me for 40 years. He knew that when I put on that face, there was no turning back. "Of course, Inés. Tell me what you heard." I told him everything, without omitting the laughter, without omitting the plans for Europe, without omitting the cruelty. While I spoke, I felt a weight lifting off me. I was no longer the victim crying on the stairs. Now I was on my turf, making decisions. "Let's draft a new document," Ernesto said, taking out his fountain pen. "Who will be the new beneficiaries?" I smiled. I had already thought about it in the taxi. I had a plan that would not only protect my assets, but would put Roberto and Claudia in their place long before I died, because I didn't plan on dying soon. I was going to live to see their faces when they realized the tap had been turned off. "No one, Ernesto, or rather, many people." "But not them," I replied. "But that is for when I die. What is urgent for me now is something else. I want to regain total control of my accounts and the ownership of the house. I want us to prepare a lifetime usufruct document with very specific clauses about who can inhabit the property. And I want to revoke the powers of attorney I gave Roberto last year." Ernesto began to write, nodding his head. "This is going to be a hard blow for them, Inés. They are going to realize." "That is the idea, Ernesto," I said, smoothing the skirt of my dress. "But they won't realize today nor tomorrow. We'll let them keep dreaming of Paris a little longer. Let them keep spending on account of an inheritance that no longer exists. When the blow comes, I want it to be definitive." I signed the new documents with a clear and strong handwriting, without my pulse trembling even once. Upon stamping my signature, I felt I recovered my soul. I left the office when the sun was already setting. The city lit up with its yellow lights. I felt tired, yes, but it was a good tired. the tiredness of a job well done. I returned home in another taxi. Upon entering, I saw they were having dinner. They had ordered pizza. The smell of grease and cheap cheese filled my beautiful living room. "I'm home," I announced. "Everything okay, Mom?" "You took a long time," Roberto said with his mouth full. "Yes, son. I met an old friend and we stayed chatting." I lied naturally. "I feel much better." Notice that praying gave me peace. I feel as if I had a new life ahead of me. Claudia looked at me with that false sweetness. "That's good, mother-in-law. Sit down. We saved you a slice." I looked at her and smiled, a true smile because I knew something she didn't. "No thanks. I'm not hungry. I'm going to rest. Tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day." I went up the stairs, this time without leaning so much on the banister. They stayed downstairs, eating their pizza, sure of their victory, ignorant that they had just lost everything with the stroke of a pen. They didn't have the slightest idea of the storm I had just unleashed. I woke up before the alarm went off, with that mental clarity one only has when one knows exactly what must be done. For months I had woken up with a heaviness in my chest, that gray fog of depression that makes you want to stay under the sheets, hoping the day passes quickly. But not today. Today, upon opening my eyes, I saw the morning light painting figures on the ceiling, and I felt an electric energy running through my veins. It was the same energy I felt 40 years ago when I had to deliver an urgent order of 300 uniforms, and I knew I wouldn't sleep for 2 days. It was the energy of battle. I got up without making noise. The house was in that deep silence of 6 in the morning. Roberto and Claudia, like good loafers who think they are royalty, wouldn't poke their noses out before 10. That gave me a 4-hour head start, 4 hours of freedom in my own territory. I went down to the kitchen and put on the coffee pot. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee flooded the atmosphere, a smell of home, of normality. But while the machine dripped, my mind was elsewhere. I needed to know the magnitude of the damage. Ernesto, my lawyer, would take care of the legal side and the future, but I needed to understand the present. I needed to see the numbers with my own eyes. I headed to the study, that room Roberto had conquered little by little with his car magazines and cigar boxes, displacing my accounting books. I closed the door softly and turned on the computer. They thought I was technologically illiterate, that the internet was witchcraft to me. "Oh, Mom, leave that alone. You don't understand it." "You're going to delete something," Roberto would tell me every time I approached the keyboard, and I, out of foolishness, out of complacency, stayed away. But I was the one who digitized the factory inventory in '98. I was the one who learned to use spreadsheets when they were still playing with toy cars. I logged into the bank portal. My fingers typed the password from memory. Thank God I never gave it to Roberto. He only had access to a joint account for household expenses and an additional credit card that I, in my infinite motherly stupidity, had granted him with a high limit for emergencies. What I saw on the screen made me clench my teeth until my jaw hurt. They weren't emergencies. La Cava Restaurant, 4,500. Esmeralda Jewelry, 12,000. World Travel Agency, 8,000. Spa and Beauty, 3,500. The list went on and on, page after page of excesses. They were living like kings at the cost of my sweat. Every line on that account statement was a slap in the face to my effort, to the nights I spent sewing until my fingers bled, to the days I ate cold sandwiches so as not to overspend and be able to pay my employees' payroll. I felt a pang in my chest, but it wasn't my heart. It was pure rage. They had been bleeding me dry drop by drop while smiling at me and asking if I had taken my pill. Claudia was getting beauty treatments with the money I had saved to renew the workshop machinery. Roberto bought imported cigars with what should be the house maintenance fund. I printed everything. The sound of the printer breaking the silence seemed to me the sound of a verdict. I put the sheets in a simple folder and hid it behind the history books, on the highest shelf, where Claudia would never look because reading gives her allergies. But money wasn't my only resource. I remembered something more valuable than the bank balance. I went to the old oak cabinet in the corner of the study. It was locked, but I always carried that small key hanging on a chain under my clothes, next to my scapular. I opened the heavy doors and the smell of cedar and old paper hit me. There, at the bottom, under some boxes of photos, was my war box. It wasn't money. It was a shoebox lined in red velvet, worn by the years. I took it out and put it on the desk. Upon opening it, I saw my true treasures. My old contact notebook, letters of recommendation signed by politicians whose wives I dressed, old promissory notes of favors I never collected, and, most importantly, the original directory of my suppliers and wholesale clients. I took the notebook. The pages were yellow, but the ink remained firm. There were the direct numbers of the textile mill owners, not their secretaries. There was the personal number of the regional bank manager, Don Felipe, whom I helped when his daughter needed an urgent wedding dress and they had no way to pay for it. There was the contact for Martita, the leader of the seamstresses' union, a fierce woman who respected me because I was always fair and paid on time. I ran my fingers over the names. Don Gregorio, Transport; Licenciada Mendez, Treasury; Dr. Solis, Director of the General Hospital. Roberto and Claudia saw in me an old woman who was only good for signing checks and dying quickly. They had no idea of the network I had woven over 40 years. A network of loyalties, of respect, of today for you, tomorrow for me. In the business world, money comes and goes, but reputation and favors owed are hard currency, and I was a millionaire in that currency. I realized I wasn't alone. I had a sleeping army in that notebook. I just had to wake it up. I closed the box and put it back, but I kept the notebook. I put it in my handbag. I sat in the leather armchair in the study and looked out the window toward the garden. The gardener, Don Shui, was already there, pruning the rose bushes. He was also part of my people. He had been with us for 20 years. Roberto treated him like dirt, always scolding him because the grass wasn't perfect. I thought about how many times I made myself small so my son would feel big. How many times I pretended not to know something so he would explain it to me and feel intelligent. How many times I let Claudia choose the curtains or the menu so she would feel like the lady of the house. I did it for love, to keep the peace, out of that silly fear we mothers have of being left alone. What irony! My fear of loneliness was what brought these crows to my nest. And now, paradoxically, upon discovering their betrayal, the loneliness was gone. I was full of purpose. I felt more alive than I had in the last 10 years. I heard footsteps on the stairs. It was almost 10. The show was about to begin. I left the study and went to the kitchen. I sat at the table with a cup of tea, pretending to read the newspaper, though my eyes didn't leave the entrance. Claudia entered first, dragging her plush slippers and wrapped in a silk robe that, I recognized with bitterness, I had paid for. Her face was swollen with sleep, and she had the bad mood she always carried in the mornings. "Good morning, Inez," she murmured without looking at me, going straight to the refrigerator. "Good morning, daughter. Did you sleep well?" So, the mattress on that bed is already very old. My back hurts. We should change it for an imported orthopedic one. I saw some on the internet that are wonderful. There it was, not even 5 minutes awake, and she was already asking. "We'll see, daughter, we'll see," I said with a soft voice, dipping a cookie in my tea. "Things are a little tight this month." Claudia stopped with the juice pitcher in her hand. She turned slowly and looked at me as if I had spoken in Chinese. "Tight? What do you mean, tight? The business is doing well, right? Roberto says the downtown premises always pay on time." "Yes, they pay on time," I replied, looking her in the eyes with rehearsed innocence. "But you know, taxes, maintenance, medicines, everything goes up. Sometimes you have to tighten your belt." Roberto entered at that moment, scratching his belly under his t-shirt. "Who has to tighten their belt?" he asked, yawning. "Your mom, who says there's no money," Claudia blurted out with an accusatory tone, as if I had committed a crime. Roberto poured himself coffee and sat in front of me. He looked at me with that condescension that now made my blood boil. "Oh, Mom, you're probably reading the accounts wrong again. I've told you not to worry about that. I'll handle it. You just relax. That's what we're here for, so you don't stress with numbers." "You're right, son," lowering my gaze. "It's just that sometimes I get anxious. One gets fearful when old." "Exactly," he said, smiling at Claudia. "You just relax. By the way, Mom, I need you to sign a blank check for me today. I have to pay the supplier for the new fabrics, and I don't know the exact amount yet. They're going to calculate it at the time of delivery." A blank check. The audacity of this boy had no limits. In other times, I would have signed it without hesitation, trusting his word. Today, that request sounded like an insult to my intelligence. "Notice that I ran out of checks, son." I lied. I had 3 new checkbooks in my drawer. I asked the bank for new ones, but they say they take a week to arrive. Things with modern systems, you see. Roberto frowned. Annoyance crossed his face quickly. "What do you mean you don't have checks? Mom, this is urgent. And the card?" "The card? Oh, what a shame. I think I left it near a magnet or something, because yesterday I wanted to buy medicines and it didn't go through. The bank said they would send me a new one too. I'm so clumsy, right?" Claudia let out an exasperated sigh and slammed the juice glass on the table. "It's incredible. Then how are we going to... how is Roberto going to pay for the fabrics?" "Don't worry, Claudia," I intervened with sweetness. "I can go to the factory. I have cash in the safe at the main office. While I'm there, I'll greet the boys. I haven't gone in a long time." The silence that followed was dense. Roberto and Claudia exchanged a look of panic. The last thing they wanted was for me to go to the factory. If I went, I would see that there was no such fabric order, or worse yet, I would see the real state of things. They had been telling me for months that I shouldn't go, that the dust hurt me, that the stairs were dangerous, that I would get very tired. They had isolated me from my own empire to loot it at their leisure. "No, Mom. How can you think that?" Roberto rushed to say, getting nervous. "You can't go there. It's very hot. There's a lot of noise. Your blood pressure might go up." "I feel very well today, Roberto. The doctor said I need activity. Besides, I'm the owner, right? What a shame if the owner doesn't appear even to say good morning." I got up from the table, leaving my cup half finished. I felt powerful. Seeing them hesitate, seeing that fear in their greedy eyes, was the best breakfast I had had in years. "I'm going to get ready. I want to go elegant. Call me a taxi, Roberto, please. Or better yet, take me yourself. That way you can explain to me on the way those new projects you talk so much about." Roberto turned pale. "It's just that... The car is making a weird noise, Mom. I was going to take it to the shop today." "Ah, what a pity. Well, I'll call a dispatch taxi. Don Paco is always available." I left the kitchen, leaving them with the word in their mouths. While I went up the stairs, I heard their frantic whispers. "Do something, Roberto. If she goes to the factory, she's going to realize we fired the old secretary," Claudia hissed. "Shut up, don't shout. I'll see what I can do. I'll tell the manager to cook the books." I smiled. They didn't know that the manager, Mr. Ramirez, was a man I hired when he was just a boy. If Roberto thought Ramirez was loyal to him out of fear, he was very wrong. Ramirez was loyal to me out of gratitude. I entered my room and looked at myself in the mirror. I no longer saw the tired old woman from yesterday. I saw Ines, the boss. I put on my best tailored suit, a pearl gray one that commanded respect. I applied makeup carefully, hiding the dark circles, highlighting my gaze. I put on my gold earrings, the ones I bought with my first big contract 30 years ago. The plan began to take shape in my head with crystal clarity. First, cut the flow of easy money, making it look like accidents or banking bureaucracy. That would make them nervous and make them make mistakes. Second, regain physical control of my businesses, make an appearance, remind the world who I am. Third, use my network of contacts to investigate every dirty move they had made behind my back. And fourth, the final blow, the foundation. While I fastened the buttons of my jacket, I thought about the conversation with Ernesto. The Inez Textiles Foundation would be the new owner of all my assets, a charitable organization to support women entrepreneurs and grant scholarships to children of seamstresses. Roberto and Claudia wouldn't see a cent of the principal capital. I would only leave them the minimum required by law if the law forced me to anything and conditioned on them working. Work. That word that scared them so much. I went down the stairs with my purse on my arm and the contact notebook well guarded inside. Roberto was in the living room, speaking on the phone in a low voice, surely trying to alert someone at the factory. He hung up quickly when he saw me. "Mom, really? It's not necessary for you to go." "Nonsense, Roberto, it's my duty. Besides, I already called Don Paco, the taxi driver. He's outside waiting." I walked toward the main door. Before leaving, I turned to look at him. He looked small, sweaty, pathetic. "Ah, Roberto," I said, as if I had just remembered something unimportant. "I forgot to tell you. I called the bank early to report the cards. For security, they blocked all associated accounts until I go personally to sign some papers and provide my fingerprints. New anti-fraud protocols. They say there are many thefts lately, so for a few days, we'll have to live with what we have in our pockets." I enjoyed the moment his jaw hit the floor. His eyes opened disproportionately. "All of them? Even mine?" "All of them, son. You see how banks are. They cut across the board. But don't worry. At home we have food and a roof. What else do we need?" I gave him a maternal smile. I opened the door and went out into the morning sun. The fresh air had never smelled so good. I got into Don Paco's taxi, who greeted me with the joy of old times. "Doña Inés, what a pleasure to see you so dressed up. Where to?" "To the factory, Paco, and step on it. I have an empire to reconquer." While the taxi pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror at the facade of my house. I knew that inside, chaos was breaking out. I could imagine Claudia's screams upon finding out that her credit cards were useless pieces of plastic. I could imagine Roberto trying to explain the inexplicable. The war had begun, and the first shot had been silent and lethal. Now it was my turn to see what they had done with my workshop, and God have mercy on whoever dared to betray me, because I didn't plan to. I took my notebook out of my purse and looked for the number of Ramirez, the manager. I dialed. "Hello?" a nervous voice answered. "Ramirez, this is Inez speaking. I'm on my way there, and you better have the real books on your desk when I arrive, or you're going to Europe too, but swimming." I hung up before he could respond. The game had changed. The boss was back. The taxi stopped in front of the green metal gate that I myself had ordered painted 5 years ago. The sign, Inez Textiles, was peeling from the sun and covered in a layer of gray dust that no one had bothered to clean. I felt a pang in my stomach, a mixture of shame and anger. They say the master's eye fattens the horse, and my horse was skin and bones. I paid Don Paco, who looked at me with a mixture of respect and concern, and got out of the car. The sound of industrial machines could be heard from the street, that rhythmic hum, clack, 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 which for me was always music, but today sounded like an arrhythmic, tired heart. I smoothed my skirt, raised my chin, and pushed the pedestrian door. The security guard, a young boy I didn't recognize, was looking at his cell phone with his feet up on the booth desk. Upon seeing me enter, he didn't even flinch. "Hey lady, you can't just walk in here like that. The supplier entrance is around back," he told me without looking up from the screen. I stopped dead. I took off my sunglasses slowly and knocked on the booth glass with my knuckles. Hard. 3 times. The sharp sound made him jump. "Good morning, young man," I said, with a voice that, although calm, carried 40 years of authority. "First, get your feet off the furniture. Second, open the main gate because I am going to inspect the cargo. And third, let Mr. Ramirez know that the boss is here." The boy paled, dropped the phone, and stood up so fast he almost fell. "Mrs. Inez?" he stammered, desperately searching for the button to open the electric gate. "Excuse me, ma'am. It's just that Mr. Roberto said you weren't coming anymore, that you were... That I was... What? I asked, arching an eyebrow. That you were very sick, ma'am. I smiled, but my eyes didn't. Well, you see that miracles exist. Open up. I walked toward the main nave. The smell of dye, machine oil, and raw cotton filled my lungs. It was the smell of my life. I entered the ground floor where 50 seamstresses should be working. What I saw froze my blood. There were machines stopped. Mountains of fabric accumulated in the aisles without order or reason. And the worst part, the atmosphere. Before, in my workshop, quiet laughter could be heard, the radio with happy music. There was an energy of camaraderie. Now heads were bowed, faces tense, fear was breathed stronger than polyester. I advanced down the central aisle. The sound of my heels on the concrete made several women look up. "Doña Inés!" exclaimed Doña Lupe, one of my oldest seamstresses, dropping her scissors. The murmur ran like gunpowder. "The lady came! Look, it's Doña Inés!" They stood up, some with tears in their eyes, others with disbelief. I didn't stop to greet one by one, although I was dying to hug them. I had to maintain the role. I walked straight to the metal staircase that went up to the administrative offices, that glass fishbowl from where the whole operation was visible. Ramirez came out of the office before I reached the last step. He had a sweaty shirt and a loose tie. He looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him, 6 months ago. "Doña Inés, what a surprise," he said, stretching out his hand, trembling visibly. I didn't shake it. I walked past him and entered my office, or what used to be my office. My solid oak desk had disappeared. In its place was a modern and cold glass table with an ergonomic chair that looked like it was taken from a spaceship. My paintings of the first designs had been replaced by posters of sports cars and colored graphs that said nothing. There was a video game console connected to the presentation screen. I felt bitter bile rise in my throat. Roberto had turned my work sanctuary into his game room. "Explain this to me, Ramirez," I said, pointing to the room with a wide gesture of my hand, without turning to look at him. "Ma'am, Young Roberto said he needed to modernize the image, that he wanted a space to think creatively." Ramirez was wringing his hands. "I tried to tell him not to take out your husband's desk, but he threatened to fire me. He said you had given him total power." I turned slowly and sat in the ridiculous space chair. It was too big for me and uncomfortable. "Sit down, Ramirez." He obeyed, sitting on the edge of a visitor's chair. "Where are the real books?" I asked softly. "Not the ones you show Roberto so he feels like a businessman. The real ones. The ones that say how much we owe and how much they are stealing from us." Ramirez swallowed saliva. He looked toward the door, as if expecting Roberto to appear to save him or condemn him. Then he sighed, a long sigh of surrender. He got up, moved a horrible piece of abstract art, and opened a safe embedded in the wall. He took out a red folder. "Here is everything, Doña Inés. Suppliers unpaid for 3 months. We have made payroll by asking for short-term loans with extremely high interest, because young Roberto withdraws the profits as soon as they come in. And," he paused painfully, "he canceled the contract with National Fabrics. Now we buy raw material from a Chinese importer, R&C Imports." "R&C, Roberto and Claudia," I murmured. "They weren't even original in their theft. And the quality? Terrible, ma'am. The seam's open. Clients are returning merchandise. The hospital canceled the gown order last week. We are on the verge of technical bankruptcy." I nodded, maintaining an exterior calm that contrasted with the fire I had inside. They were destroying in 6 months what took me 40 years to build. But what hurt me most wasn't the money. It was the betrayal of my people, of the quality of my name. "Good, Ramirez. Thank you for your honesty, even if it arrived late," I said. I opened my purse and took out my old notebook. "You are going to make 3 calls right now. I want you to recover my husband's desk. I don't care where it is. If they sold it, buy it back. I want you to call National Fabrics and tell them that Inez wants to speak with the owner, and I want you to prepare a meeting with all the staff in 20 minutes. But ma'am, young Roberto. At that moment, the office door burst open. Roberto entered, red-faced and breathing heavily. Surely the guard at the entrance had warned him. He was dressed in designer sportswear, nothing appropriate for an industrial plant. "Mom!" he shouted, trying to sound authoritative, but his voice cracked. "What the hell are you doing here? I told you to stay at the house." "Ramirez, I told you not to let anyone in." I adjusted my glasses and looked at him with that infinite patience one has for a tantrum-throwing child. "Good morning to you too, son. How good that you arrived. I was here chatting with Ramirez about modernization." Roberto stopped, confused by my friendly tone. He looked at Ramirez, then at me. "Modernization?" he asked, lowering his guard. "Mom, go home. You're sick. You're delirious. This is too much stress for you. Look, you're pale. Ramirez, call a taxi for my mother." "I'm not pale, Roberto. It's the light from these white lamps you put in. They're horrible," I said, taking out a handkerchief to wipe a non-existent stain on the glass desk. "And I'm not going to leave." Notice that upon arriving, I realized something terrible. I got up and walked toward him. He instinctively stepped back. "What are you talking about?" "That I have left you a very heavy burden, my love." I put my hand on his shoulder, squeezing a little more than necessary. "I see this disaster, these changes, and I realize how much effort you have made. But the accounts don't square, my son. Ramirez was showing me some very strange numbers. I think someone is stealing from you, Roberto." Roberto's eyes darted toward the red folder on the desk. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down. "No one steals from me, Mom. I control everything. They are long-term investments. You don't understand modern economy." "Oh, son, you're right. I'm from the old school." I walked toward the window overlooking the plant. "I only understand buying low and selling high and paying on time. But notice that those fabrics I saw downstairs look cheap. Didn't you say you wanted to go to Europe? With that quality, we won't even make it to the corner." Roberto approached, annoyed. "Those fabrics are top-notch. They're imported." "From R&C Imports?" I dropped the question softly, turning to see his reaction. He froze. The mention of his shell company hit him like a brick. How do you know the name?" "I saw it on an invoice right here." I lied, pointing to the pile of papers. "What a coincidence, right? They have your initials and Claudia's." "How romantic, son. Starting a business together to supply the factory?" Yes, exactly." He improvised, sweating. "It's to save costs. We eliminate intermediaries. It's a brilliant strategy, Mom. Claudia had the idea." "I imagine she did," I said with a cold smile. "So brilliant that we are losing clients. But don't worry. That's what I'm here for, to help you fix these little details." "I don't need your help," he snapped, losing patience. "I am the owner. You gave me the powers." "I gave you powers to manage, Roberto, not to dismantle." My voice hardened for a second, enough for him to feel the temperature change in the room. And powers, like everything in this life, can be revoked. But let's not talk about boring legalities. Let's talk about work. I addressed Ramirez, who was watching the scene like someone watching a train wreck in slow motion. "Ramirez, ring the bell. I want everyone gathered downstairs now." "Don't touch anything," shouted Roberto. "I am the boss here. Mom, stop interfering or I swear I'm going to send you to a nursing home. You're senile." There was a sepulchral silence. Ramirez held his breath. I looked at my son, at that 40-year-old man who had just threatened to lock me up. The pain was sharp, but it lasted an instant. Then it was replaced by steel determination. "A nursing home?" I repeated slowly. "Wow, that doesn't sound very compatible with the trip to Paris." "Oh yes, nursing homes are expensive, Roberto, and without money—" I walked toward the door. I passed by him and whispered, "Let's go downstairs. You wouldn't want your employees to see you shouting at your mother. That's bad manners. And if I taught you anything, it was manners." I went out into the hallway and started down the metal stairs. The sound of my steps resonated throughout the industrial warehouse. Roberto followed me, grumbling, not knowing what to do. He was trapped between his arrogance and his fear. Downstairs, the machines had stopped. The silence was total. 50 faces looked at me. I saw fear. I saw hope. I saw curiosity. I stood on a wooden platform we used to check the large rolls. Roberto stayed at the foot of the stairs, arms crossed, red with anger. "Good morning, everyone." My voice projected clear and strong, without the need for a microphone. Years of shouting over the noise of looms had given me good lungs. I know it has been a difficult few months. I have been indisposed, but the rumors of my death, as they say out there, have been greatly exaggerated. Some nervous laughter broke the tension. "I have come to inspect the work, and I have to tell you that I am not happy. Not with you," I clarified quickly, seeing how they tensed up, "but with the direction this ship has taken. I see materials that are not worthy of the label Inez Textiles. I see disorder." I looked at Roberto, who was glaring at me. My son Roberto has tried to innovate, but sometimes the new is not better. Sometimes you have to go back to the roots. "So starting today, I am going to retake my office. I am going to come every day. We are going to do a complete audit of every meter of fabric, every peso spent, and every decision made in the last 6 months." A murmur of approval ran through the plant. Roberto took a furious step forward. "That's not true," he shouted, trying to regain control. "My mother is confused. She no longer makes the decisions. Keep working." The seamstresses looked at him. Then they looked at me. No one moved. No one turned on a machine. Power is not a paper signed before a notary. Power is respect. And Roberto had just realized that he didn't have an ounce. "Roberto," I said with a tone of voice that echoed off the sheet metal walls, "why don't you go home to rest? You look very bad. Besides, remember that your cards are blocked. If you stay here, you won't be able to treat anyone to lunch. Better go see what Claudia is cooking. Here we have work to do." It was a low blow, public and devastating. Revealing his lack of liquidity in front of the employees he probably owed wages to or treated with arrogance. Roberto opened his mouth to shout something, but realized he was alone. Ramirez was behind me. The workers were with me. His bubble of young boss had burst. "This doesn't end here," he hissed, loud enough for me to hear, but low so the others wouldn't. "I'm going to call the lawyer. I'm going to declare you incompetent. You're going to regret this, crazy old woman." "Call whoever you want, son," I replied with a sweet smile. "But use the office phone because I think your cell phone plan was also paid for by the company, and I just gave the order to cut it for lack of budget." Roberto took out his cell phone, looked at the screen, and cursed. No service. He turned around and left the factory slamming doors, like a child who has had his toy taken away. When the door closed behind him, the air in the factory changed. It felt lighter. "Well," I said, clapping once, "the show is over. Doña Lupe, come here. I want you to show me those sewing samples that are opening. Ramirez, bring the phone to my office. We are going to call National Fabrics. And someone please throw that space chair in the trash and find me a real chair." While I went up the stairs again, I felt my legs trembling a little, not from weakness but from adrenaline. I had won the first battle in open field. I had humiliated the enemy and recovered my army, but I knew this was just the beginning. Roberto was a coward, but Claudia was poisonous, and a wounded and cornered animal is when it becomes most dangerous. I sat in front of the glass desk, took out my contact notebook, and dialed the first number. "Hello, Ernesto," I said when my lawyer answered. "I already recovered the factory. Now we go for the house. Prepare the foundation act. I want it ready to sign tomorrow. Oh, and Ernesto, Prepare an eviction order, just in case. I have a feeling that tonight's dinner is going to be very indigestible. I hung up and looked through the glass at my people working. The rhythm of the machine started again. Clack, clack, clack. But this time it sounded strong, constant. It sounded like life. Europe, I murmured to myself, caressing the cover of my old notebook. Yes, maybe I'll go to Europe someday, but I will go with my money and in first class. You, my dear parasites, will be lucky if you make it to the bus stop. I returned home when the moon was already high and the street lamps projected long shadows on the facade of my mansion. Don Paco's taxi pulled away slowly, leaving me alone in front of the massive wooden door that had sheltered my family for decades. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid to enter, nor that anxiety that oppressed my chest, thinking about my daughter-in-law's long face. This time I felt the cold calm of someone who carries the sentence in their pocket. Upon opening the door, the atmosphere was charged, dense like the air before an electric storm. There were no lights on in the foyer, only the glow of the television in the living room. I entered slowly, leaving the keys on the entrance table with a deliberate metallic clink. I wanted them to know the boss was back. Roberto and Claudia were there, sitting on the sofa like two salt statues. Upon seeing me, Claudia jumped to her feet. She had runny makeup and red eyes, but not from sadness, but from that tantrum rage of someone who has never received a no for an answer. "It's the last straw, Inez," she shouted, completely forgetting the false mother-in-law of other times. "I went to the beauty salon and my card was declined. I had to leave my watch as collateral. What humiliation." I took off my pearl gray jacket calmly and hung it on the coat rack. I smoothed my blouse and walked toward them without haste. "Good evening to you, too. How good that you are awake. We have visitors on the way." Roberto got up, fists clenched at his sides. He looked desperate, with that cold sweat of someone who owes money and has no way to pay. "Visitors? What are you talking about, Mom?" His voice trembled between fury and panic. "We don't want visitors. What we want is for you to unblock the accounts right now. I called the bank and they told me there is an audit order for suspicious movements. Do you have any idea what you have done? I have suppliers waiting for payments." "Suppliers like R&C Imports?" I asked, sitting in my favorite armchair, the one they had relegated to a dark corner. Roberto turned pale. He opened his mouth and closed it again, like a fish out of water. Claudia, however, didn't understand the reference and continued with her attack. "I don't care about your office games," she shrilled. "Roberto says you went crazy, that senile dementia is affecting you, and he's right. Tomorrow we are going to bring a psychiatrist to evaluate you. You can't leave us without money just because your wires got crossed. We have rights." I looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. How small that woman looked now that she didn't have my credit card to sustain her arrogance. "Rights are earned, Claudia. And money, too," I replied with a soft voice. "And about the psychiatrist, save the consultation. I was already evaluated this afternoon." Roberto took a step back, bumping into the coffee table. "What?" "While you were here lamenting over your plastic cards, I stopped by the office of Dr. Mendez, the most respected neurologist in the city. He did all the tests. I am lucid, Roberto. I have a clearer mind than you, and I have the medical certificate in my bag, notarized and ready, in case that predictable move of declaring me incompetent occurred to you." At that moment the doorbell rang. 3 firm chimes. "That must be Ernesto," I said, pointing to the door with a nod. "Roberto, open it. It is bad manners to make the family lawyer wait." My son didn't move. He was paralyzed by fear. I had to get up myself to open it. Ernesto entered with his leather briefcase under his arm and a solemn expression. He greeted Roberto with a dry gesture and didn't even look at Claudia. "Good evening, Inez. I have everything ready," he said, putting the briefcase on the dining room table. "Sit down," I ordered. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. Roberto and Claudia approached the dining room dragging their feet. They sat in front of us holding hands, seeking strength in each other. They looked like two scolded children in the principal's office, only the punishment awaiting them wasn't missing recess. Ernesto took out 3 thick folders. The sound of paper sliding on the varnished wood resonated in the sepulchral silence of the house. "How do you know?" Ernesto started, adjusting his glasses. "Mrs. Inez has decided to restructure her estate to ensure the future of her legacy." "Restructure?" interrupted Roberto with a broken voice. "Mom, I am your only son, the universal heir. That can't be changed just like that." "It can be, and it was," I said, crossing my hands on the table. "Ernesto, read the first clause." The lawyer cleared his throat and read with a monotonous but clear voice. "By means of this act, all real estate assets, including the factory, the downtown commercial premises, and this residential property, as well as investment accounts and machinery, become the absolute property of the Inez Foundation for Textile Development, a non-profit entity dedicated to the training of vulnerable women and educational scholarships." The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Claudia had her mouth open, eyes bulging. Roberto looked at Ernesto as if he were speaking in another language. "Foundation?" whispered Roberto. "And us?" "You get nothing," replied Ernesto, turning to the next page. "Mrs. Inez has been appointed lifetime president of the board. Upon her passing, the administration will pass to an external board of directors. The statutes explicitly prohibit the sale of any of the main assets. The house is not sold, the premises are not sold, the factory is not sold." "You can't do that," exploded Claudia, hitting the table. "That money is ours. Roberto has broken his back working. You promised us Europe." "I promised you that you would have a future, not that you would spend my past," I cut her off sharply. "And speaking of Europe," I took out of my purse the folder I had taken from Ramirez's office that morning, the one containing the invoices from R&C Imports. "Here I have proof of systematic embezzlement from the company for almost 2 million pesos in the last 6 months. False invoices, materials of lowest quality charged at gold prices, diversion of funds." I threw the folder on the table. It opened and the sheets scattered in front of Roberto. He looked at the papers and sank into the chair. He knew he was cornered. That wasn't bad management. It was a crime. Fraud. Jail. "Ernesto has prepared a criminal complaint," I continued, seeing the color disappear from my son's face. "It is ready to be presented tomorrow, first thing. Unless—" "Unless what?" asked Roberto with a threat of a voice, not daring to look up. "Unless you accept the new conditions." Claudia was crying silently now, tears of impotence and frustrated greed. She had seen herself in Paris buying designer bags, and now she saw herself in a cell or on the street. "What conditions?" she asked, with hate in her gaze. "First," I enumerated, raising a finger, "you are going to sign a waiver to any claim on future inheritance. You accept the creation of the foundation and your role in it. Second, Roberto, you are going to resign from your position as general director. Starting tomorrow, you will be junior sales manager. You will have a base salary, no commissions, and you are going to punch a card like everyone else. If you are absent, it gets deducted. If you steal a paperclip, you go to jail. And third, this house." I paused a moment to savor the air of my home. I looked at the ceiling beams, the old paintings Claudia hated. "This house is property of the foundation. I have the lifetime usufruct. I can live here until God calls me. You can stay if you want, but you will pay rent, market rent. And Claudia, you will take charge of the cleaning and cooking. I fired the maid today. If you want to live here, you will have to maintain it. The kings are finished. Here now we are all workers." Roberto raised his head. His eyes were full of tears. But I saw something else in them. I saw the boy he once was, before ambition and laziness corrupted him. Or maybe it was just fear. "Mom, why are you doing this to us?" he asked, with a victim tone that no longer moved me. You said we would sell everything when you died. I smiled, a sad but firm smile. Exactly, son. You said, when the old lady dies, we sell everything. The problem is that the old lady decided not to die yet, and she decided that everything is worth more than your vacations in Europe. This is my life, Roberto. It is your father's sweat and mine, and I am not going to let you turn it into masses to warm your vanity. Ernesto brought the documents and a pen closer to them. You have two options, said the lawyer. Sign this and accept your new reality, or Inez presents the fraud complaint tomorrow at 8. You have 5 minutes. The pendulum clock in the hallway marked the seconds. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Each second was a hammer blow to my son and daughter-in-law's ego. Claudia looked at Roberto, expecting him to do something, to scream, to break something. But Roberto was defeated. He had lived under my shadow and then under his wife's. And now that the light of truth illuminated him, he realized he didn't have his own shadow. With a trembling hand, Roberto took the pen. I'm sorry, Claudia, he murmured. You are a coward, she spat at him. But when he passed her the pen, she took it too. She knew that without Roberto and without my money, she was nothing. They signed. One by one, the documents remained sealed with their defeat. Ernesto reviewed the signatures, nodded, and put everything in his briefcase. Very well, tomorrow the notary will come to notarize this. Good evening, Inez. Rest. I accompanied Ernesto to the door. Upon closing it, I felt the house breathe again. I turned toward them. They were still sitting in the dining room, looking at the empty table as if it were a coffin. You are lucky, I told them from the entrance arch. You have a roof and you have work. Many out there would kill for that. Or, tomorrow at 7, I want breakfast ready, Claudia. And Roberto, don't be late to the factory. The time clock doesn't forgive. I went up the stairs. My knees hurt, yes, like always. But each step felt light. Upon reaching the landing, where yesterday I had heard my death sentence, I stopped. I looked down. They were no longer the owners of my destiny. They were my tenants. They were my employees. I entered my room and took off my shoes. I approached the window and looked at the moon. I thought about my husband. I protected it, old man, I whispered. I protected what we built. I lay down in my bed, that big and old bed. For the first time in 6 months, I didn't have to take pills to sleep. I knew that downstairs in the darkness, 2 people were learning the hardest lesson of their lives. Never underestimate the one who taught you how to use a spoon. I closed my eyes with a smile. Tomorrow would be the first day of the rest of my life, and I had a lot of work to do. The transformation was just beginning, and I was going to be the architect of every brick. The house was silent, but this time it was a silence that belonged to me. 8 months have passed since that night when the dining room table became a court, and I, with a fountain pen and 3 folders, dictated the sentence. 8 months, that seemed like a whole life. I wake up at 6 on the dot, as always, but now the silence of the house is different. It is no longer an empty or fearful silence. It is the silence of order. I go down to the kitchen and the aroma of pot coffee is already there, mixed with the smell of toasted bread. Claudia is standing by the stove. She no longer wears those imported silk robes she bought with my money. Now she wears a cotton apron and simple clothes, comfortable for working. She has lost a little weight, and although her hands no longer sport that perfect, expensive salon manicure, they look more useful. "Good morning, Inez," she says upon seeing me enter. Her tone no longer has that false and cloying sweetness. It is dry, respectful, perhaps with a hint of resentment that will never completely go away, but it is real. "Good morning, Claudia. Is Roberto's lunch ready? Remember, he has inventory today and won't be able to go out to eat." "Yes, it's already in the lunchbox. I put ham sandwiches and an apple." I sit at the table, and she serves me coffee. At first, she cried every time she had to serve me. She said it was a humiliation, that she wasn't my servant. I calmly reminded her that she wasn't my servant. She was my loving tenant paying her rent with domestic work, just as we had agreed in the contract. If she didn't like it, the street door is very wide. She never left. Fear of poverty is a great teacher. Roberto comes down the stairs running, buttoning his shirt. He no longer wears those designer suits that made him look like a peacock. He wears the factory's administrative uniform, white shirt with the Inez Textiles logo embroidered on the left pocket and navy blue pants. He looks more like a man, less like a shop window mannequin. "You're running late, son," I tell him, consulting my wristwatch. "The delivery truck leaves at 7:30 and you have to supervise the loading." "I'm going, Mom, I'm going. I broke a shoelace," he responds, taking the lunchbox Claudia extends to him. "Thanks." He looks at me for a second. In his eyes, I no longer see that arrogance of universal air. I see tiredness, yes, but I also see something I hadn't seen in years. Purpose. Knowing that if he doesn't work, he doesn't eat has cured him of the laziness disease better than any medicine. "Yesterday, I reviewed your sales report for the week," I comment while blowing on my coffee. "You improved the numbers in the North Zone." Roberto stops dead, with the toast halfway to his mouth. A shy shine appears in his gaze. "Really? It cost me a lot to convince Mr. Gomez to buy from us again after the disaster of... Well, I know, but you achieved it. Keep it up and maybe next month we'll consider a productivity bonus. Small, don't get excited." He nods, and for the first time gives me a smile that isn't to ask for money. "Thanks, Mom. See you there." He leaves the house, and I see him walk toward the bus stop. He sold his sports car 5 months ago to pay the debt he had with the credit cards. Now he travels by public transport or goes with me in Don Paco's taxi. He has learned what it costs to earn every peso, and that, for me, is worth more than any inheritance I could leave him. I finish my coffee and get up. "The house looks clean, Claudia," I tell her before leaving, "but check the windows in the living room. They lack shine. Ah, and this afternoon the foundation's accountant is coming. Prepare coffee and cookies." "Yes, Inez," she responds, lowering her head. I go out to the porch and breathe deep. The morning air smells of victory. I arrive at the factory and the atmosphere is electric. The sound of the looms is a constant symphony. Clack, clack, clack. A rhythm that pumps life into the whole building. The seamstresses greet me with genuine affection as I walk through the aisles. There is no longer fear in their faces. They know their salaries are safe, that benefits are paid on time, and that the quality of what they do is respected. I go up to my office, that glass fishbowl from where I see my reborn empire. Ramirez waits for me with a smile from ear to ear and a blue folder under his arm. "Doña Inez, the results of the first quarter of the foundation arrived," he says, putting the papers on my oak desk, which we recovered from a pawn shop 3 days after my coup d'etat. I open the folder. The numbers are solid. But beyond the figures, what fills my soul are the photos and reports attached. 20 scholarships delivered to workers' children, I read aloud, feeling a knot in my throat. 3 microcredits for former employees who wanted to start their own haberdashery, and the donation of uniforms for the rural school of the South. It is a total success, ma'am. People talk about Inez Textiles not only as a brand, but as a pillar of the community. Clients are returning on their own. They say they prefer to buy from us because they know where the money goes. I look through the glass. Downstairs, in the loading area, I see Roberto. He is with a clipboard, counting boxes, sweating bullets. He argues something with the driver, points out an error, corrects, helps load a heavy box. No one treats him like the untouchable young boss. They treat him like coworker Roberto. "How do you see him, Ramirez?" I ask, pointing to my son with my chin. Ramirez follows my gaze and sighs. "I'm going to be honest with you, Doña Inez. At first, the boys wanted to make his life impossible. They were very hurt by the unjustified dismissals from before. They gave him the heaviest boxes, sent him on the farthest errands. I know, I told them not to intervene. Well, he endured, ma'am. He took it. He didn't complain. He asked Doña Lupe for forgiveness for having wanted to retire her by force. And little by little, he has earned his place. He is not the fastest nor the smartest, but he is compliant. I nod, satisfied. My plan wasn't to destroy my son. It was to rebuild him. I had to demolish the building of pride to find the foundations of decency that his father and I laid so long ago. They were very buried, but they were there. At noon, I go down to the employee dining room. I sit at a table with Doña Lupe and two other seamstresses. I take out my Tupperware with homemade food. Roberto enters 10 minutes later, gets in line, receives his tray, and sits with the warehouse guys. He doesn't seek to sit with me, nor does he seek special treatment. The boy looks good, Doña Lupe tells me, peeling a tangerine. He no longer looks over his shoulder. He needed to get his hands dirty, Lupe. Easy money rots the soul, work cures it. And the daughter-in-law? Asks with that mischievous curiosity old friends have. Surviving. She is learning that a house doesn't clean itself and that money doesn't grow in pots. She is hard-headed, but hunger softens even stones. We laugh. It is a clean laugh, without grudges. In the afternoon, I have a meeting with the Foundation Council. They are serious people, professionals who respect my vision. We sign the authorization to buy new machinery, cutting-edge German technology. While I stamp my signature, I think about the irony. Roberto and Claudia wanted to sell everything to go to Europe to spend. I am bringing a piece of Europe here, to produce, to generate. At the end of the day, I have a moment alone in the office. The sunset sun dyes the factory walls orange. I take out of my drawer that old will that was going to be my sentence. That paper that said everything would be for them without conditions. I tear it into 4 pieces and throw them in the trash. My legacy is not money. My legacy is this: a company that works, a foundation that helps, and a life lesson that, although painful, saved my family from their own stupidity. I look at myself in the window reflection. I am almost 69 years old. I have gray hair. I have wrinkles. My knees still warn me when it's going to rain. But I am not an old woman waiting for death. I am a woman in the fullness of her power. They underestimated me because they thought age took away my value, when in reality age gave me the experience to see the blow coming and the wisdom to return it with double the force. I leave the factory. Roberto is waiting outside, sitting on the sidewalk, visibly exhausted. "Shall I give you a ride, son?" I ask him. Don Paco is already there with the taxi. Roberto looks up and nods. He gets into the car with difficulty. His muscles hurt. "What a heavy day," he murmurs, leaning his head on the seat. "That's how honest money feels, my son. It weighs more, but it lasts longer." During the trip, he stays quiet for a good while. Then he breaks the silence. "Mom, I was thinking." "Yes?" "The contract with the coastal hotels, I think we can recover it if we offer organic fabrics. I read an article about that. We could use a small production line to test." I look at him surprised. He isn't thinking about selling the factory to go on a trip. He is thinking about growing the factory. Prepare a written proposal with costs and sales projection. I answer him with a professional tone, although inside I am smiling. "Present it to me Monday first thing. If the numbers square, we see it with the board." "Okay, I'll do it on the weekend." We arrive home. Dinner is ready. Claudia has prepared chicken with vegetables. It is not a gourmet banquet, but it tastes good. We eat, the 3 of us together. We don't talk about trips to Paris, nor about jewelry, nor about society gossip. We talk about the price of cotton, about the repair of the warehouse roof, about the leak in the upstairs bathroom that Claudia fixed with an internet tutorial, because I didn't want to pay a plumber. It is a simple life. It is a real life. When I finish dinner, I wipe my mouth with the napkin and look at both of them. "I have an announcement to make," I tell them. Both tense up. The trauma of announcements is still fresh. Claudia squeezes the fork. "What is it, Inés?" she asks with a trembling voice. Next month I'm going on vacation. They look at each other confused. On vacation? Repeats Roberto. Where to? To Europe. I drop the bomb with absolute tranquility. They stay petrified. The word Europe floats in the air like a ghost from the past. Ah, to Europe, stammers Claudia, and I see how her eyes fill with a mixture of envy and astonishment. You alone? Yes, I'm going to Paris, to Milan, and to Barcelona. There are some textile fairs I want to visit, and while I'm at it, I'm going to sightsee. I'm going to go to the museums you wanted to see. I'm going to eat in the restaurants you dreamed of. Roberto lowers his gaze, ashamed. He knows that was his macabre plan, and that now I am living it as a just triumph. That's good, Mom, he says in a low voice. You deserve it, really. I know, I respond. I deserve it because I have earned it, and because I am alive. You will stay here taking care of the business and the house. Ramirez will be in charge of the factory, but he will watch you closely, Roberto. And you, Claudia, take care of my plants. If a single orchid dries up, I charge you double rent. Claudia nods, resigned. Have fun, Inez. Bring us, I don't know, a magnet for the refrigerator. I laugh, a strong and sonorous laugh that fills the dining room. I will bring you work, that is what I will bring you. New ideas, new designs, because this isn't over until I say it's over. I get up from the table and go up to my room. I pack my old suitcase, that sturdy leather one that has traveled with me so many years. I put in my tailored suits, my comfortable shoes, my notebook. Before sleeping, I look out the window toward the garden. The night is clear. I think of all the women my age who are treated like old furniture, ignored in their own houses, stripped of their dignity by ungrateful children who only wait for the inheritance. I wish they could all find that war box we carry inside. I wish they all knew that while there is breath, there is power. I lie in my bed, stretch my legs, and feel a deep peace. I am not afraid of the future, because I am the future. They wanted to sell my life when I died, but they